sounds like you're giving up on maintaining that $2,000.
Not at all, not at all. And they'll tell you, those who are on my board.
Repeat the question. If we can't hear it
The
better.
question was, it sounds like we are giving up on the $2,000. All right? I will tell you that there is no way. Our position is, we're not touching it. We're not negotiating. All my quotes in the newspapers has been, I'm not negotiating against myself. I am not negotiating against the Shelley Silver. And the fact is, we want the status quo. Because it's in our interest to maintain the status quo. And the reason I raised it as an issue is because it seems to me, and to those of us who have been watching this political fighting that's going on, is to a large extent is we don't know what the governor wants. But I actually believe that the governor, because it's the symbolism that is out there, that he's focused his attention on the $2,000 number. The reason is, I understand the rationale. In 1997, because I was up there when the deal was cut between the governor, they made a mistake. They failed to put in an escalation clause and on the $2,000 number. That was their screw up. We noticed it immediately, but we kept our mouth shut. If they had put in that escalator clause based on CPI, that number today would be $2,700. So understand that. Our position is, well, that was the deal that was cut. So we're going to, and the whole purpose of 2000 was to deregulate as quickly as possible. So they recognized their mistake and they can't do anything about it. And they're trying to rectify that error they made in 1997 by fighting on that issue now. And that's how I think they're explaining it to the governor why he needs to increase that number. That's going to be a war. I'm going to tell you right now, of all the issues I listed, I believe that's going to be the biggest challenge that we're going to have. Now, I will tell you, we've had meetings of what we want to see as part of enhancements. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a deal. When I say a deal, I mean a negotiated settlement between the governor and the Republican Senate. If there is no understanding, then we're going to advocate that Dean Skelos do the same thing that Joe Bruno did in 2003. And so what's that? You pass the legislation and you go home. And you say to the Assembly, if the laws expire, it's on your head, it's not on our head. And the Michael McKees of the world would rather see turmoil and chaos, and the question is then, will the Assembly do the same thing they did in 2003, or will they let the laws lapse and then create this major outcry? Because you know and I know that we have owners who are not necessarily nice people, and I remember in 1997, some of them jumped ahead when the law expired. People don't remember, in 1997, Rent Stabilization actually expired for 5 days. It was on Father's Day, they made a deal, but they never implemented the law. And so for 5 days, there was no rent regulation in the city of New York. And what we said to our owners is, don't do anything stupid. 48 hours later, somebody did something stupid. They tried to evict somebody. So that blew up in our faces, and guess what? We did what we had to do, and it got enacted again. And that is very difficult because, you know what? Everybody here, I'm assuming, is responsible owners. You're business people. But there is a large universe of people out there who can care less. Yes?
Potentially, if the amount is increased to deregulate, or it's taken away completely, what do you think will happen to units that are already deregulated?
That's a very good question. Actually, what they want to do, they being the Assembly, is they want it re-regulated. Those units that have been decontrolled, they want to re-regulate them and make the law retroactive back to a date certain. Now, let me tell you, that would be a total disaster for a variety of reasons, because for those of you who may have refinanced, it was based on your rent rolls, banks want certainty, and unfortunately the banks always run away from us when we ask them to get involved. They don't want anything to do with it because they'll just do the write-off. It's a total disaster. So actually one of our people said, well, if we are put against the wall with the gun and there is no choice but to do something, let's try to make it at least prospective in nature, not retroactive. Keep those units that have been decontrolled, decontrolled. And remember, none of us know the threshold of the dollar amount either. I think eventually, in my mind, and it may be the worst case scenario for us. Let's play the worst case scenario. Let's assume, and I don't know whether you people remember, if Spitzer had still been governor, the number was $2,700. I'm going to tell you right now, that was the justification. The rent would have gone from $2,000 to $2,700. For many of you to achieve $2,700 would have slowed down the entire pace for years and years and years, because I doubt if any of you would be willing to put in $50,000, $60,000 on a turnover of an apartment. It makes absolutely no sense. So, and then of course, another thing we learned last year is even though the law is expiring this June, they try to change it last year. So even if you make an agreement, I don't care what the number is, even if you make an agreement, it doesn't mean that you can trust, and now I'm going to be very politically biased, you can't trust the Democrats to be bound by a deal that you make today. Because last year, if it wasn't for, and I know, as I said to people, whatever cards we get dealt, we have to play. But the guy who saved this industry was Pedro Espada. And everybody makes fun of him because he's in litigation. But if it wasn't for him, this industry would have been hit with all those issues that I rattled off. And he got into trouble not because of us. He got into trouble on his own. Yes?
A lot of us here are small owners. And I've made an investment in the radio commercials. But I've always asked, why not put the face of the small owner, the small business person, on the TV?
Well, let me just, okay.
You understand? I see other commercials for other causes, Medicaid redesign, all of that.
Well,
how come our face is not out there?
Well, number one, we are not unlimited in terms of resources. You want to do a TV ad, it's going to cost you, or you want to do a full-page ad in the New York Times, you know how much that costs for one day? $60,000. Okay? So when you're running a budget, understand something, when we're doing a PR campaign, we have to take a calculated decision of how much we can actually do within the budget constraints. Because, we're the best deal in town. I mean, I don't hear anybody here complaining about our dues because we're cheap. In terms of operation, we provide you with the services by coming in. You can speak to our counselors. So unless we're prepared to increase dramatically those membership fees that you pay, and we're not, because we recognize how difficult it is for you in terms of expenses, we're limited at this moment in terms of doing a radio campaign. That's not to say, and we've had these discussions, that at some point we may be running, not TV, because that to me is a total waste, but print in local newspapers, in the cheaper newspapers, to have that. But at the same time, the most important thing is the message itself. And I will tell you, everyone, it's amazing how many people have heard our radio commercials on radio, whether it's 1010, 880, and they all tell us the same thing. It's about time that we've done it. I mean, we've done it in the past, but we are now doing it much more often for two reasons. One is in terms of Albany, and the second thing is Rent Guidelines.